Hi everyone, my name is Yolanda Cuba. I'm the Vice President for Southern and Eastern Africa for MTN Group. That's my official title. My unofficial title is Chief Champion for Africa's Progress.
Dr. Craigie, Stevenson, CEO of Cell-C. Didn't always want to be in a lot of the conversations in the current frame, but very positive movement for us. Difficult last run we've had, so looking forward to some of the conversations today. Everything is possible. I think that will be my one.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Raisibe Morathi. I'm the CFO of Vodacom. So I'm sitting in a very important corner that is keeping all of you connected.
Hi, Adrian, Gore, CEO of Discovery and Vice President, I think, is it Vice or Deputy President of BUSA? Vice. I should know my title. But excited to be and excited to have the narrative. Should be a very interesting morning. Great. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Megan Pydigadu, Group Financial Director of EOH. Been with EOH for 3 years as part of the turnaround, and for me, values is everything.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Busima Vuso, and I'm the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Klein. I'm a director of SME Fund, but more importantly, a driver of B4SA, Business for South Africa. And one of our key, I think, guiding lights is how we marshal business and businesses' resources to try and A, change the narrative, but B, fix our country. So I'm very excited to be here to see how we can do that. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Hylton Kallner. I'm the CEO of Discovery Bank.
Hi, I'm Lincoln Marley. After 19 years at Standard Bank, I joined the old Net1, which is now Lesaka, trying to focus on financial inclusion. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Ziaad Suleman. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at EOH. Recently joined from IBM, where I was the COO for Africa for 13 and a half years. I also represent South Africa at BRICS in 4IR, and I serve on 2 presidential commissions, the PPGI and also the Digital Work Accelerator.
Ricky Robinson from LRMG. I'm feeling my age. We're 25 years old this month. But the short story is most of you are my clients. So Bronwyn, please keep me in check and make sure I behave today.
Everyone, I'm Lucy Ferreira. I'm come with far less designations than all of you. I'm representing Alec Hogg from Biznews.com, and I'm honoured to be here. Thank you.
I'm Bronwyn Nielsen. I'm going to put you through your paces today and disrupt.
Hi everybody, my name is Nyimpini Mabunda. I am the CEO of GE in Southern Africa. So if anyone is looking for renewable energy solutions, let's talk. Connectivity and power. I also have the pleasure of chairing the South African chapter of US Chamber of Commerce. So, lastly, I am the author of Tech Charge. So Tech Charge is my ethos, and I'm pleased to say that if I can displace Bruce with his genius as well as Magda, I would be number 2 or number 1, because currently my book is the 3rd best-selling business book in South Africa.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Janine Gertzen. I am Bronwyn's partner in crime at the Nielsen Network, and like I say, most of you probably just see my name in your email boxes, but then Bronwyn's face. So it's so lovely to be with all of you, and looking forward to very, very interesting conversation this morning.
Morning, everyone. I'm Fatima Newman. I'm the Chief Risk Officer for the EOH Group. Looking forward to the conversations this morning to see how we drive accountability forward. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Anel. I'm the Managing Executive for Nedbank Corporate and Investment Bank. I've worked with many of you before, and my surname is very known to many of you, but for my brother, not necessarily only for me. But my motto is the Nedbank make things happen, and I just add a little now to it.
Mr. Kosev, any words just in terms of introduction? Why are you in Oz at the moment, sir?
Yeah, I'm Stephen Kosev, our former CEO of Investec. I'm current chairman of BidCorp and co-chair of the Youth Employment Service. I'm still actively involved in South Africa. That's just part of what I do. But I'm delighted to be here and listen to what everyone has to say. Maybe I can just throw a few words in.
I just want to tell you why I've got you all around the table. A sense of urgency from my side. I think I came back from the World Economic Forum in Davos, which was a summer Davos. I hosted a conversation, as I have been doing for my whole entire life, And I hate to say this is now like 23, 24 years. It's really worrying when you start saying that's how long you've been doing your job. And I kind of think, well, what is better? The depth and breadth of your experience or the fact that people start adding the numbers together? I don't want my legacy to be that I get to this stage in my broadcast career and my conversations don't count. I want to make this conversation count. And that's why I've chosen the topic of leadership legacy, words to action. From now on, every conversation that I host, I want definitive action to come out of that conversation, that we can measure and we can monitor our progress. I always borrow from Henry Ford, who says, and I paraphrase, that if you can measure something, you can manage it. Again, I've paraphrased. But we have a lot of different discussions, and we need to understand whether we are making a difference. Mr. Gore. So often when I've been really down and out about the South African environment, I've sat across the interview desk from you, and I've always taken comfort in your vision-led leadership, values-led vision leadership, with that optimistic bias on the South African environment. How are you feeling right now? And again, remembering BUSA that you're bringing into the forum now. So that collective voice has to follow your own voice. Let me hand that to you.
Sure, it's a tough question. I mean, I don't think my position has changed. I remain really convicted about the potential of the country. I'm also a great believer in the resilience of the country. It really is resilient. I think despite all the stuff that we read and see and hear now in the Zondo Commission, etc., we're still standing, and the economy's actually been growing. There's a huge amount of resilience. I also am completely factually of the view that factually the narrative is much worse than the reality. Reality is actually better than I think people give. And you can hear introductions here. People are remarkably kind of inspired. So there's amazing sense of kind of we can do things. Against that, I'm appalled, and it's important to say that I think the more it's not optimistic, it's the more that you seek solutions, the more I think we should justifiably be extremely annoyed when we let down. You read things like the Zondo report and the Eskom stuff, whatever. Being optimistic or being confident doesn't mean that you should be less scathing about poor performance, quite the opposite. So just so I'm thinking aloud, I'm just making the point. I remain completely of the view that we have a leadership vacuum, not just in government, in business as well. We have to give South Africans a sense of confidence about the future. We have to create a vision, and particularly now when things seem, in a sense, futile, when you read some of the stuff and people just throw their hands up in the air and they kind of lose hope for the future. That's a fundamental issue, I think, of leadership. I think just to make a few points from my own context, Bronwyn, I mean, I think my role in BUSA came out of the work we did, Lisa, myself and others, in the vaccine process with government. And kind of I think an incredible realization that if there's a clear defined goal, there's a deadline and there's real stuff at stake, the country can pull through, which we did, I think, in the vaccine process. I mean, we'd never have thought the problem would have been hesitancy. We actually got the vaccines out there. And I think the same is now. We need that kind of constructive focus to get things done. I also want to make the point that I am completely of the view that people are having a very tough time. Inflation, load shedding, poverty. But people do not know that there is progress along a number of areas. The Zondo Commission itself is progress. If you look at Operation Vulindlela, there's a lot of stuff that's moving, albeit way too slowly. We've got to kick it over the line. So, in short, I'm of the view that the country has massive potential. I'm of the view we should be completely intolerant of corruption and of incompetence. And I'm of the view that business has to lead strongly, constructively. It has to pull things together as much as we can and help government and other sectors of society get things done. We mustn't be futile and negative. It doesn't serve anything at all. So, sorry, starting off where you began, I remain not optimistic, I remain of the view we need constructive leadership, and we've got to fight futility. I think it's so dangerous. That vacuum is problematic.
Exactly, and perhaps if I can borrow from that to say that the one thing that I would like to see today is that from this consolidation and this cooperation, that you walk out of this room feeling better than you did when you came into the room. So let's park that for a moment. Busisiwe, you have been vocal. You are standing up as a real beacon of leadership in the country. Talk to me about how you feel about all of those businesses behind you from a business leadership perspective, and what you feel about the South African environment at the moment.
So I think maybe let me accept that in the last 12 months, we are seeing an emergence of a pro-business ideological shift. And I think you are seeing a government that realizes and acknowledges that for us to be able to turn the economic trajectory of the country around, we need to implement structural reforms. And I think that in of itself, I think is a huge shift, because I think 18 months ago, 24 months ago, there wasn't that acceptance and that acknowledgement from government. When we would raise the issues of structural reforms, they would say that business is shifting the goalpost. They would say that we are making excuses. So I think we are at a good place from that perspective. I worry about the pace of implementation. I worry that government doesn't seem to realize the urgency of the situation. I worry about the fact that we still remain a tinderbox, as a country. I worry about that for an average South African, life continues to get harder and harder. But I also worry about the fact that the window of opportunity for South Africa, is diminishing. I worry about the fact that we don't seem to realize that the interest in South Africa is not in South Africa in and of itself, but it's in South Africa as a gateway to the African continent. The interest is in the 1.4 billion people in the continent, not the 60 million people that we have in South Africa. So if we fail, therefore, to accelerate and implement and make ours a conducive environment within which business can operate, then, there are other gateways, in the African continent. And it's unfortunate because whatever those economies are, they are less sophisticated than what South Africa is, They are not as advanced like what the South African economy is. We are going to lose that position of being the gateway to the African continent precisely because there isn't that realization and there isn't that agency from a government perspective.
I agree with everything said. I agree with that threat, but there's something about being aware of that danger, that we lose our competitive position. But at the other end, there's some understanding just how much we have here that is so different. You cannot compare us, I think, to many of the countries on the continent elsewhere. I mean, I've used a few anecdotes to make the point. I'm amazed how few people know some of this stuff. I mean, our economy is nearly double the size of the whole Ukraine. I don't think people know that. They watch TV and they see the Ukraine and the food crisis that the whole world will be suffering from. But Gauteng, I think, is 80% the size of the Ukraine's economy. I don't know if you know that. The Cape Town-Joburg route is, I think, the 12th busiest route in the world. People don't realize that. I mean, there's data all over. 80% of the continent's long-term assets, pension fund assets, are in South Africa. So, I mean, if we were to drop to a situation where we're not competitive with other, it would be a massive. I'm making the point, there's something healthy about realizing that competitiveness, but I think kind of the behavioral issues of loss aversion, we've got something to lose. We've got a massive economy. That's what scares me and excites me. We mustn't get into this mindset that we've got nothing here, small. This is a super sophisticated, competitive economy. Someone's got to say, listen, this is a great place. We're world class. We're building. That's what we need.
And I hear you 100%, and you're absolutely right. What we have here is phenomenal, but the infrastructure advantages that we have can quickly be lost if we continue down the current trajectory. Mr. Kosef, I'm bringing you in here. And, as you say, you are still intimately involved with the South African economy. You sit on so many influential bodies. Give me your viewpoint from your position in Australia now.
My factory setting is that of an optimist. So, like what Adrian was saying, I think South Africa has a lot to offer. And I think think it will be difficult for other countries, and I understand that you can't rest on your laurels, to compete with what South Africa has to offer as a platform for Africa for the world. But we do need an enabling environment, and what we have at the moment is a disabling environment. And that's because of the lack of the capacity of government and the lack of capacity of the state-owned enterprises, and the shortage of skills that we have as a society. So we have high employment, but at the same time, when I was on business leadership, we had some youngsters do research that came out that said we had 880,000 shortage of skills. And unless we start focusing on the right issues as opposed to the wrong issues, I think that we really can lose the edge. And I just take a look at what happened to even our currency over the last while. It actually strengthened against most major currencies in the world, which you would have thought with this sell-off as a consequence of weak markets, etc., South Africa would take a hiding. So there is, as Adrian points out, a very decent underlying base. But we've lost a lot of momentum and a lot of capacity because of poor economic policy. And I'm not talking about the one side we've done well is how we run our treasury and the central bank. But as for the rest, we have been useless. And that comes from the fact that we have failed to educate our people properly, that we have this big shortage of skills, and that we're not business friendly enough. The leadership just is not driving us down the right road and encouraging us to run with the ball properly. We have enough skills. We're short of skills as a country, but we have skills to get on the bus and allow us to attract the right skills so we can actually take the economy forward. Each skill creates at least 5 jobs. That will be 4 million people less unemployed if we have the right skills complement in our society. So, there's a lot we can do, and there's a big opportunity for us at the same time as a country.
Thank you, Stephen. So, Busisiwe, in terms of driving that bus, business leadership, South Africa, I want to understand whether you can see change happening. I mean, you calling to account business, you are driving an agenda, you're steering the bus, one of the buses that are all heading in the same direction. Do you feel you are making a difference? Can you see the difference on the ground?
I guess we'll probably have to define what seeing the difference on the ground would mean in our context. There is a lot that is being done by the business community. There is a lot of commitment, that I have from all of business and all the CEOs, from the skills transfer into municipalities, from assisting with the capacitation of Operation Vulindlela for the implementation of the critical structural reforms, from deploying retired professionals into PSEC so that we can accelerate the SOE reform agenda. The big ticket items that are actually going to ensure a sustainable economy in the future. So there is a lot that business is doing from that perspective, to conversations with the NPA to look at how we can assist with their capacitation now that the Zondo report is out. But I worry, Bronwyn, that the true measure of whether we are making a difference is going to be in the 46% unemployment in terms of the expanded definition, where you have more people that are unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape. While we have 65% youth unemployment, and while we have more than 50% of our people living in poverty, and being the most unequal society in the world, can we sit here and say that we are doing enough? My view would be that no. This economy probably works for the 10% of the population. But you see, that is not helpful. The biggest ticking time bomb that we have as a country is inequality.
Mr. Gore, I'm coming back to you here.
Listen, I think everything BUSA has said and Stephen have said, I strongly agree with. I think what we have to do, and what BUSA is doing, and BLSA is doing as well, is we are trying to engage government in a bilateral and ultimately the social compact around trying to identify, I think, 6 or 7 key interventions to get the flywheel turning. I think there's no shortcut but to the points made here. You need economic growth, you need skills, you need economic growth to get rid of unemployment. And, I think we know it has to be done. Energy, water, transport, and we've got, if I understand, 4 billion of coal that we can't get to the ports to export. That's $4 billion. I haven't done the numbers. It's 1% of our GDP just sitting that we could actually export. So I mean, my view is not to. We need action quickly.
I want to talk about the intergenerational gaps. I want to talk about sustainability from a climate perspective. I want to talk about reverse mentorship as a potential solution. I love what I'm seeing in terms of retirees coming back in to guide municipalities. I think there's a lot more from a solution perspective we can do there. Ricky Robinson.
What I'm hearing is a macro conversation, and I think there's also a micro conversation. So I want to start a micro conversation because I think, Adrian, what we can do in terms of those 6 big things, I don't know. But what one wants to do here is connect the dots between what you want to do and what we can do as heads of business in terms of the theme of leadership legacy. And Bronwyn, there are 3 things that strike me as relevant to the conversation. And I'm interested in the reference to the flywheel and to Jim Collins because that's one of them. But the first one is COVID and the revolution that has happened. And as leaders, we need to wake up to that revolution because it's not just about virtual work and are we going to stay at home or not. It is about legacy. And what our people are saying is, if you're still talking the profit narrative, we're no longer inspired by that conversation. And even if we don't have another job, we're going to look around. And suddenly we talk about Africa, but it's a world market. And so we need to wake up that there's been a revolution, and that unless we're talking the legacy conversation, we're not going to be relevant to our own people and to the big 6 issues. The second thing that strikes me is in the news at the moment, and I see, well, you're from General Electric, and poor old Jack Welch, who was leader of the century 20 years ago, and the minute he's passed away, is destroying capitalism single-handedly. And this is someone that had 35 people that reported to him become CEOs of organizations, who built a business from $14 billion to $600 billion. And now he's a person destroying capitalism. And the reason I think that accusation is made is the legacy one. So here's someone who had impact, who impacted millions of people, and built a business with real wealth that is destroying capitalism. And then the third thing I'd say is Jim Collins, because Jim Collins said 15 years ago that 3 things define a great company. One is capital returns, so the financial 10x outperformance. But he also said impact, distinctive impact, so what impact on your people, what impact on your country, what impact on your continent. And the third thing he said is legacy. So what is it that you are doing that is making your organization worthy of lasting? And Bronwyn, I think what has happened in the last 15 years is that might have been a definition for a great company. But frankly, I think it's a definition of any company today.
My biggest concern is that success for South Africans have meant different things. We come from the history of the liberation movement, where success for black people and white people was completely different, right? And then that was interposed by a commonality in all of us in the referendum, release of Madiba, and we actually got that unity back. And then the next phase was like the BEE kind of legislation, which meant success more for black people, and white people felt like it was displacement or actually taking away from us. And this kind of non-common success factors, what is good for the marginalized, for the ones that are left behind, is not the same as the rest. And then we had the financial crisis. And the financial crisis, I think, just took South Africa project, or South Africa Inc. project, like 10 years backwards, at least. And the reason why I say that is because the only people then that benefits post the financial crisis is business. However, the measure of poverty actually accelerated to its worst point in the period post-financial crisis for the great majority. And for me, those are the things that actually worry me, is the measure of success. So if we look today, I mean, Bosisi was talking about the poverty line, right? 30 million people in South Africa actually live below the poverty line, right? On our education system, right, we are sitting today where the maths pass rate at 50% is sitting at 22%. And then there's the safety issue, safety and security. I don't care which country you have. If you cannot guarantee personal safety, safety of property, safety of everything that anyone actually cares about, you are not going to have a sustainable economy. No one who feels vulnerable is actually going to invest in any environment. We will build taller walls and we will build better jails, but we will not be improving the lives of everybody. And that is really, for me, the crux of the issue. From a personal ownership perspective, I've started already something called the Mentorship Boardroom, right? And the Mentorship Boardroom really is about actually taking people like you around this table and saying, go back and go and motivate, sell hope, sell inspiration, sell the dream back to younger people, younger generations. We need to get young people motivated again, actually led. The kids that are sitting as graduates in the youth are actually feeling disempowered, disengaged, and no one is interested in me. The biggest actually motivator that came through was from Nyimpini, for example, saying, let's take charge, right? Let's actually take charge.
Douglas.
If I have to reflect on a lot of the conversation, not wanting to rehash anything, there's a big positive that comes out of here in the sense that I think we've hit an inflection point. We really have. For the first time, we're actually sitting and we're acknowledging that we've got a number of problems, like real problems, whether it's the infrastructure issue, private business partnership, etc., where we need to go on to. But I do agree with what Yolanda says. It's actual conversations that need to be had. Each of us as CEOs is sitting in a position in what is our business, where does our business fit into it? But more importantly, who do we touch? Where's our influence points across it? Because together we make up a mesh. Then we want to talk about the youngsters. I just have a look at this huge panic within organizations. Do I have a job tomorrow? We don't do enough talking with our people. We leave that up to a number of people. Passage talk. This is, I think one of the things from COVID that's created a huge problem with communication. Because you assume somebody knows something, but we've got no confidence in our youth. They feel totally disempowered, and we've done nothing whatsoever to make them feel like they're worthy of anything. My action is to make sure we communicate, understand what I have as a leadership role, what my business can do, and who it can touch.
How are you communicating?
Verbal is number one. Number two, action. Action, getting out there and doing things and listening to someone. When they say, we want to work from home, what do you mean? There's a quid pro quo for everything. But do we need to get efficiency out of it? Yes. Do we get a set of goals that we put together that said we will get a result that's going to change it? We have an opportunity now to change an enormous amount of the very narrative we're talking.
We've got companies from different stages in their respective life cycles in this room today. You've got high flyers, a lot of you that have got no problems at the moment. Yes, you've got the general macroeconomic environment. You've also got companies that have been through stringent turnarounds, that have felt very lonely in those environments as new management teams have come in and have stood together to try and correct legacy corruption. And are you doing enough to work together? Are you learning from the lessons that you've made? And only because Lesaka's rebranded, we know the legacy issues there. 1 year into the job, and your vision is huge. Lincoln Miley.
It's hard to turn around companies that had been damaged. If you read all of those volumes of the Zondo report, there are going to be many other companies that have been damaged, SOEs and private sector. Who's going to go in there and try and fix those companies? If all of us sit on the sidelines and just lament that something's wrong. So that's the first thing. The second thing is around ethical leadership. This is fundamental. If you read the Zondo report, it's got all of us tainted. Public sector, private sector, facilitators, enablers, and those who look the other way. My question is, what shall we teach the next generation? unless we show them an alternative leadership model that doesn't depend on stealing, that doesn't depend on taking shortcuts, that focuses on excellence to be the best in the world. So I think that we as leaders must be that example in what we do to make South Africa to succeed again. I'm not giving up on it, and I hope you will not giving up on it.
As leaders, our role in most cases is around creating the vision and pointing out the positives and creating direction and communicating it effectively. You know, there's a lot of things that we just simply don't communicate. And the reality is that we've got an incredibly industrious country, huge resilience, lower volatility than what you'll see almost anywhere else in the world. And the data tells a different story in many instances. And I think as leaders, that's our responsibility, is to share the information, share the facts, not to sort of sugarcoat them in a sense, naively, but in a way to ensure that the correct narrative is communicated. And I think the reality is that in most cases, it's the trend that's much more important than the absolute.
So two things. One, I think it is world class. You know, when people talk about a failed country, it's not a failed country, it's a failed state. Government is failing. The private sector isn't. I mean, the private sector has got brilliant people, great energy, great products that, in fact, we export globally. And so I think two things. I think that the narrative is critical, but I also think providing some key interventions that give credibility to that narrative. And I think that there are a couple of things that we are looking at and working on. I mean, the one is looking at fix the cities. And there it is very much, we know that the municipalities are failing. But if we take one or two interventions, so for example, Adrian and Discovery looked at potholes, filling potholes, and they've done a great job, but scaling that. You know, doing things that are visual, not just for business people, but also for the unemployed, for people who are poor, who are impacted by lack of, you know, traffic lights, by, you know, sewerage. Those are the kind of things that, frankly, they're not that difficult to do, I think, with the skills that we've got in our business community. The one other that we're looking at, and I will be 10 seconds, is around looking at, for example, Cape, the kind of Cape Town and Stellenbosch as an emerging market tech hub. So there's amazing stuff happening there. There are VCs, there's startups, there's kind of brilliant minds that are exporting products globally. And something we should look at is how do we help scale that? In that way, we take over when people talk about Lagos, right? And people talk about Nairobi being able to attract the Twitters of the world. Frankly, that's what we should be doing. We've got the infrastructure, we've got the people, we've got the skills to do that.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to take this to the other side. Stephen Kosev, while I am walking the mic down to Anel Bosman, I want you to just give us an intervention here. Are we shifting the needle? Do you like what you're hearing, sir?
Look, I'm hearing what we've discussed before in various forums in business leadership, is that the private sector needs to pick up the ball and run with it. But at the end of the day, to have an economy that's growing at less than 3%, we're not going to deal with unemployment rate. So you need the macro enabling environment. Now, one of the guys said he doesn't want to talk about the macro, he wants to talk about the micro. But we have been trying. You know, I've been involved in that kind of stuff for decades. And you need the macro to work as well, to actually get the momentum.
I always think about leadership as leaders are seen as merchants of certainty. But the only thing we can really be is brokers of hope. That's the only thing we can do. And I always think about that in the different levels of hope that we need to bring. And you spoke about the six actions, which is hope at a country level. And I really think when business and government come together, and we see it, for instance, in the partnerships of renewables, the extent of what can be done is really impressive. But there are also structural reforms, and we see how business actually took up the commercial and industrial generation the moment that the legislation allowed us to do it. But now there are small things that we still need to do so that we can get it going, and those pipelines take a while to do. I think at a company level, we can do many things to bring hope. And we see ourselves as investment bank knowing many people around the economy. And we try to link our clients and what they can bring to sources of requirements. And we've seen it on a small scale actually work well. And we hope that it can actually grow. And then I think at a personal level, with Stephen, we are very much into the YES program, and we bring 50 YES students through an investment bank every year.
For me, specifically in an EOH context, having been involved in the turnaround, is one of the big lessons that stood out for us is the issue around stewardship and the fact that we don't see that across multiple organizations, companies, SOEs, etc. And so my ask today is from a collaboration perspective and the business-to-business support is that when people are down and they're working hard at turning issues around, don't sanction people for purposes of trying to make a difference and to stand up for what is right. And when they're asking for very specific support, let us be the conscience of what does that mean, and not hide behind contracts, and that's what the board says, that's what this one says. So very specifically, think about it in the context of what am I being asked, and where do I have the ability to play a role?
I think we all talk about change being a constant, and we do recognize that the changes that we are going through now in society are really transformational. It is putting a lot of challenge on us as leaders to also look at things differently. And in South Africa, but interestingly, it's not just South Africa, but in South Africa specifically, we live in the world of parallels. We have enough problems, but we also have a lot of solutions. But what we are sitting with as a challenge, as society, is that we have not yet found those solutions to be affordable to majority of the country. I like the ideas of, we need to help government here and there, but I think gone are the days of looking at governments solving this type of problems. In government, the things that we are trying to get, the infrastructure, the business process, the whole fabric has not changed enough for the solutions to be provided differently. And that is why no amount of pouring money at this problem is giving you a different solution. But time is now for some of this to be provided by us as the private sector.
Very difficult to summarize everything in 2 minutes, but a couple of reflections. The first thing is we have to think about inclusivity. If you think about exclusivity, it talks to how do you make sure that you don't leave a whole generation and a whole lot of other people behind us. What's also important is how do you make sure that you bridge that divide, whether it be through technology, whether it be through society or otherwise, right? Very, very important for us to bring together. That then brings us to, if we think about inclusivity, we have to have the right skills. But skills is easy to say as just a narrative. Are we having the right discussions around the right skills? Because demand is what we need to understand. We cannot just be creating skills in a vacuum. Otherwise, you create more and more skills where people don't find jobs. Very, very difficult challenge, very important for us to solve. As part of the way forward, it's extremely important for us to come up with, I think somebody said it, an action plan. I think you said 7 things, right? That is the most important thing. What do we want to be good at? What's the action plan behind that? How do we then grow this pool of people that can support that? We need to become far more broader by mentoring, guiding, helping people, but then facilitating the outcome. We have to be very deliberate around that.
For all of this to work, we need the macro to work. And this is something that really has been a concern of mine, because if you look at a 10-year GDP CAGR to 2019, it was under 2%. 10 years. That's a decade. And we can say, well, 9 wasted years. You extrapolate it to 2022 and you normalize for COVID, it wouldn't have done that much better. So I think what we really have is a macroeconomic crisis. The plan to grow the economy with all the things that we have going for us, the fundamentals that Adrian has mentioned. We've got a lot going, and it's a big economy, but it needs to grow. So in my mind, because we're sitting on a time bomb, especially with youth unemployment, and all of that, even our own businesses, it's not going to be helped if the economy is barely growing 5% with the kind of inflation we have. So I'm saying, what do we need to do as leaders? Where do we need to intervene and get involved to help accelerate the economic growth? Because we all need it. So for me, that's my challenge, where if you want legacy and you want way to action, we need to build a capacity to get things done. Talk is cheap. And that is the thing. So for me, my commitment is, I'm a qualified executive coach. I'm putting up my hand to adopt 5 people from SOEs or DGs whom I can also impart knowledge and be pragmatic and help with some of my private sector skills built over 25 years to help them get things done. But it won't be enough. Skill is a big issue, like Steven said. But how do we actually start to support the ability to execute where we know there's capability gaps?
So from my perspective, I think I'm just going to build a bit more on what Fatima said. From our perspective at EOH, really what happened there was when good men do nothing, it enables an environment. And I think it really does call for stewardship and good leadership. And a lot of the people we had to exit out of EOH, they said to us, but I don't understand, I did nothing. And that was the whole point. And so I really do think we need to hold people to a higher level of accountability. People need to stand up. We've even seen it in our regulatory bodies. They'd rather hide behind the regulations and subparagraph whatever instead of doing the right thing. And I also think our regulatory bodies we have to hold to a higher account. We need to be honest and do the right thing as opposed to, well, it says this in terms of the Constitution, I can't do that.
Remember what you're leaving with, what you're leaving me with, and what we're building to is the advice that you are going to give leaders that are the future leaders, leading through the new normal. And you're going to give one piece of salient advice that you think when that person picks up our leadership handbook for the new normal, it has a difference, it makes a difference. What is that salient advice that you want to leave as I build this leadership handbook for the new normal?
We have to be deliberately inclusive. In us being what we are actually being, I guess, unconsciously exclusive in our development of this country. We're leaving people behind. So we need to be more deliberately inclusive, and ethical leadership is the compass that we need to actually live by, because what we accept today as benchmark will be the benchmark for the next generation in terms of what they will accept as acceptable behavior.
For me, I think we need to be responsive to the fast-paced changes in society. I think the private sector needs to step in with agile and affordable solutions to the entire society, not just for the high net worth individuals. And I think affordable education, health, power, water, and everything, all of these things that are sitting at the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, that we are able to access, but others are not able to access. And I think we are in a better position to provide them. I think we need to innovate faster and faster and faster.
I think as leaders, Bronwyn, we need to change our attitude towards building our country, being invested in it, number one. Number two, on the back of that as leaders, then I think we need to be being clear about hope and vision and engaging. If it's micro engagement, if it's macro engagement, as Stephen was saying, we need to engage, and to Raisibe's point, those kinds of things manifest from that. And then thirdly, I think we have to absolutely abhor corruption. The point made, it's worth dying for to stop corruption and to stop that kind of rot of the society. That's what really hurts people, and particularly people who are on the margins of society. And we need to, I think, abhor mediocrity. We need excellence. So I would be about attitude, about vision and hope, and about quality and excellence.
No, I just think that maybe just following on the earlier comments, we need to be much more just conscious of the need to inspire, the need to paint a picture of hope and optimism, but set explicit goals and then communicate effectively and frequently on exactly how we're doing. I think it's absolutely crucial.
Key question is, why do you want to lead? Is it for narrow, selfish reasons, or is it for a higher goal? Because that's going to make a difference in the decisions you make and the conduct which is going to be exhibited by you. Why do you want to lead?
The one line that I'll leave with you is leaders are to provide a hand up, not a hand down. And essentially, that's by doing everything, I like the word that Adrian used excellently, in supporting people, providing guidance, thought leadership, giving of yourself and everything else that goes with that, right? So by providing the hand up, you support people and raise the standards rather than just the pure handout. Thanks.
Ricky?
So I'm going to borrow one from one of my many mentors and heroes. It happens to be Bono from U2, the person who single-handedly had $250 billion of third world debt written off for Africa and took a band to top in the world for 40 years. And he said it's much easier to be successful than to be relevant. And what I particularly loved, he said, I can't change the world, but I can change the world in me.
So I think one of the failures of leadership in South Africa in particular in the recent past has been the lack of decisiveness. And I think my view is that leadership is about responsiveness. Leadership is about being what your country, your company, your constituency needs you to be at the time. Leadership is not about being popular. And I think as business in particular, I think we would be making a fundamental mistake to think that we would play to the populist gallery in place of sound economic analysis. So if business is more trusted than government in this country, we therefore have an obligation, to speak truth to power and to see how we can shift this country towards a particular direction.
So just to build on that, I think most people here are successful, and I think leadership is not just it's about moving from success to significance. And part of being significant, your ability to be there is to have courage. And I think that's what Bosie said, leadership is about courage. And everyone needs to find that within themselves.
So from my perspective, you need to be guided by your principles, and you'll always come to the right answer, and always be authentic and people-centered.
Rise above shouting from the sidelines. Rise above commentating, and roll up your sleeve and do something. To change this country and for us to build the South Africa we want to see, it takes all of us.
My final parting shot would be in demonstrating courage and bravery. How do you do that? You absorb complexity and you submit with clarity. So make sure that you understand what's going on, understand your thoughts, understand the facts, and lead with a very clear plan from an action perspective.
I think leaders are visionary, but we also need to hold the system. We need to help the system to make sense, bring psychological safety, bring hope, but also be impeccable.
You create your own hope. When you know what it is, then drive that to influence and ensure you participate in your place in an inclusive society. It's always possible, and it's your responsibility to change what is wrong, and we all know what wrong is.
Look, I think this is a very useful kind of process, and I use the word process as opposed to discussion. And it is very important for leadership generally to understand what their responsibility is towards society and what they can do to help facilitate change. And unless business actually runs the ball, I do not think that we are going to get the change that we desire. And the better interventions that we've had, and when I was still in business leadership, was when all of us got together and were exceptionally proactive. In particular, something like Lenny Gage took a whole group of people standing up against an appointment that was really going to sink South Africa very, very quickly. And we got the turnaround. So I do think that it is leadership's responsibility and leadership organization's responsibility to try and do the right thing, not only for their organizations, but for broader society. Because at the end of the day, if our society fails, if our system fails, our organization likewise will fail. So, we don't live off society, we live in society. And we have to make the country work, otherwise our businesses will fail or will not be as successful as we would like.
Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate that. Let's just give him a round of applause for joining us from Australia. Thank you, Stephen Kosef. Thank you to everybody in the room, to BUSA Siwe, to Adrian Gore. Thanks for kickstarting this conversation. Thank you very much.